Hello, everybody. This is your Rebel Without Applause. Once again, Bill Kalmanson coming to you from my movie studio apartment, now aptly renamed into a television studio apartment because it's both. It's a television studio and a studio apartment courtesy of Facebook Live and Instagram TV. And today I have a very special guest. I'm so excited. We are exercising all the tools of technology and we are social distancing across the great span of this country all the way to Asheville, North Carolina. And with me today is one of the great veterans of the fame game, a fellow comedian, and he's got the scars to show for it. He's all the way out there in Asheville, North Carolina. I consider him a friend. He's a guy I've admired. Folks, you've probably seen him on, you for sure have seen him on Johnny. If you're old enough, you saw him with Dave, that being Letterman, and of course, Jay Leno after all of them. And he's here with me on the phone right now. I'm so thrilled to have him. Folks, with me on the other side here is Ritch Shydner. Welcome, Rich.
Oh, thank you, Bill. That was quite a build up there. Thank you so much.
Well,
it's the old death intro. Please welcome. He's the funniest guy you'll ever see, folks.
Yes,
and then funniest man in the world.
Yes, and then the MC's really building a plank for you to walk off of.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, we started already, and I just want to brief the audience. Not only are you, a great veteran of the Comedy Wars, and personally, I can't tell you how many days or nights, rather, I sat sitting in the corner of the Improv wishing I could get on fucking stage and watching you kick ass with all the energy and fury that, you brought to the stage as a comedian. And I'm like really excited to have you here at this moment. But not only are you accomplished stand-up and an actor, we were both, by the way, on Married with Children. I did a guest star on that one time long ago.
Ah, cool.
But you're an author, and you've written some great books, and you're also a historian of comedy. So I
love that.
Yeah, I do too. Now, firstly, I just want to ask, for the benefit of everybody, how are you feeling, man?
Everything's fine. Everything's fine. I mean, I'm aware, like most people, and I'm slowed down. We're just in our house in Asheville, North Carolina, and just socially distanced from everybody but each other, my wife and I. So it's all good. We're okay. I mean, I can't complain.
So you're not. And has the wave of COVID-19, crossed the boundaries of the?
Yeah. There are very few cases here in this county that I'm in, Buncombe County.
Right.
The population is only 250,000 for the county, and I think the last report were like 15 cases or something, and they're all. I don't know whether they're still affected or by them or not. I don't know. I mean, it's not been like big rushes of toilet paper. Now, ammo is going. I mean, there's been a run on ammo, and there's virtually only the lower caliber left. The high caliber stuff that can stop a zombie. Because a lot of people up here do believe this is the start of the zombie apocalypse. Right. That stuff is the only things left on the shelves of small caliber stuff. All the high caliber stuff is gone.
Well, I read this, that the high caliber weapons does indeed stop the virus. It actually works.
It does stop the virus?
Yes.
Well, my wife hits me with a leaf blower when I come in the door.
Okay,
and that's about the only thing we're doing.
The low caliber stuff doesn't do jack against COVID-19.
No, but the high caliber will take care of it.
Oh, yeah.
That's what I thought.
Especially with the bump stock, if you got the automatic with the bump stock.
The bump stock.
Yeah, you're so fucking fine,
I got a cheaper version. I got the burp stock, and you have to actually burp.
Okay.
Burp in order for it to go off.
Yeah, I was thinking about
that. Was so bad. That was so bad. Halfway through it, I knew it was bad. Halfway through that, I knew
the burp stock. Yes.
The burp stock.
Yes.
I know.
Well, we have to do. There was a line of there's this gun shop in Culver City, and there was a big line around it. And I think not only does it the higher caliber weapons defeat the COVID-19, but it also can kill anybody in front of you in line for toilet paper. So
that was the whole thing. They said, look, I didn't get in time for the toilet paper. If I get ammo, then I'll definitely be able to find toilet paper.
Yeah, it nullifies it. It's definitely, So it works both ways. So now let me ask you this, because I know I have a basic outline of your history. You're like you're from Springsteen land, right? You grew up in
Jersey. Yeah.
Jersey, and I noticed where you went to Gettysburg College.
Yeah.
In Pennsylvania,
where the battlefield was.
Right. I love that place. I once visited and I was walked scrambled among the rocks of Little
Oh
Round
my
Top,
God. Yeah,
and
yeah, yeah.
walked Pickett's Charge. I was like,
All that. I actually did a recreation in '74 after I graduated. I did came back in this summer in July and did one of the recreations. But I also made a mistake of taking acid and hanging around Devil's Den, which was not a good idea.
oh my God. So that when you say recreation, does that mean like reenactors, like you put on a
Yeah,
uniform?
reenactors. It was just a reenactment, exactly.
Right. And what side did you pick? I mean, you were from New
I was
Jersey.
not picked. I was the guy who had the troupe that I was in, who invited me to come, was a surgeon at Walter Reed Hospital. I can't remember his name, and I bartended in my senior year, and he would hang out at the bar, and he was dating one of the bartenders there, and he asked if I wanted to come back and do it. So he was union, and had a uniform fit. Look, some people are really into it, right? They don't do anything but eat the food that was offered back then. They wear the clothing and stitched exactly the way it was back then. This guy had, we had steaks on the grill. The guys next camp are like chewing on rotten hardtack, and we're having steaks and drinking whiskey and beer. I mean, it was a party. It was
so it's like a football game when what do they call that? After the football, whatever.
Yeah, it was tailgate. We were tailgating the Civil War. That's what we were doing.
Yeah.
But it was fun. It was great. And then, he just goes, okay, the first volley, he goes, you fall, you fall, you fall. And then keep going. And the next volley, you fall and you fall. It was like, it was great. It was fun.
Oh, so you get to die too. And
yeah, you guys would get to die and on.
And then you get to go to a surgical hospital and they get to amputate a limb, and it's just like
that's what he was there for. He was a surgeon.
Wow. So now Gettysburg College, also Eisenhower lived there, I believe.
Yeah. In fact, the place I bartended, a Holiday Inn, the Secret Service for Mamie, because Mamie was still alive then. This was like 70 to 74 when I went to school there.
Uh-huh.
So the Secret Service came and drank there. That's why this guy would go hang out there, because he would talk to the Secret Service. He was like a guy, was a World War II vet. I can't remember his name or anything, but anyway, yeah, I did. Yeah, Mamie Eisenhower was still alive there when I was.
That had to be a high pressure gig for a Secret Service officer. You got to protect Mamie Eisenhower.
I think they did a movie about that. There was a movie about protecting the older widow.
Shirley MacLaine.
Based a lot. Yeah, I think it was based upon Mamie. She was pretty feisty apparently, and would run him around a little bit.
Yeah.
But other than that, there really was no threat. There was not like.
Yeah,
there was a threat to Amy's life. Mamie's life.
Mamie's life. Yes, Shirley MacLaine played that part. I remember that just came to my mind. So then you were, and then somehow you got this idea, like there's this comedy world out there. How do I get into it? I guess.
I was going to law school in Washington D.C. and I was always funny, and I was just cracking people up in class. And this guy, Howard Vine, said, I got a place for you to go perform, do comedy. I don't even know if he called it stand up. I don't know what he said. I'd seen George Carlin and other stand ups. I'd seen people do it live. Robert Klein, saw in '73. I'd seen people do it, but I had no idea that it was possible for me to do it. And I went and did it and got one reaction. One person went, huh, that's it. Just kind of a strangled start of a laugh. Complete.
It fucked up your life for the next 20 years.
That's it, man. That's enough for me. I'm in.
Yeah, because I remember seeing, it was like I saw like guys on television, older people of the World War II generation.
Yeah.
And if you want to be an actor, you go to acting school. I guess the actor studio. But I didn't really know how people could become a comedian. Like, how do you do that?
I had no idea. I mean, I was thirsty for it, hungry for it, because I would look at the morning newspaper or a TV guide, these things that you would have the schedules and what would be on the shows, and any of the talk shows, Mike Douglas, Merv Griffin. Any of those shows in the daytime, if they had a comic on, like Ed Bluestone or Albert Brooks was my favorite. I'd look at who was going to be on the Tonight Show. I'd always look and see if there's a comedian on. I would watch it. I mean, you couldn't tape it. This was before VCRs. I mean, it would just I would just sit up and watch, or go on the daytime, find a TV and go watch the daytime talk show till the comedian came on. Before I was even doing it, I was doing that.
Yeah, so you were a fan first.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, and did you have the albums like the Cosby albums and like Hello Mother?
My dad had comedy albums, and then I had some. Absolutely, I started getting comedy albums in college. Yeah, Cheech and Chong. All of us, Cheech and Chong brought the comedy albums back, and then George Carlin's Class Clown in '72. That sealed the deal.
And Cosby had him too.
Yeah, Cosby he was an early '60s guy, and I did listen to that in high school.
Mm-hmm.
But it was Carlin and then Klein. I think his was out like '73 or '74 or somewhere in there.
Yeah,
those are the ones those albums that really was like I was listening to them all the time.
Now, how did you first come into contact with Lenny Bruce?
I was staying at Kip Tabb's house in the summer of '72. They had the Lenny Bruce album, and there were a couple other albums they had we were listening to, but it was Lenny Bruce albums, and I was like, wow, this guy's way different, different,
like on another level, like
yeah. And so before I got into it, I was listening to Lenny Bruce too. I had a college professor who was into him. So when I came back to college, that's after '72, I came back and this was a public speaking professor I had who helped really encourage me to be funny. When I said I just listened and found this new guy named Lenny Bruce, he laughed. He goes, "Oh, that's the guy. That's the guy."
And he was already dead. He'd already been dead. I think he died in '65 or something.
Oh yeah. He was like, that's Lenny Bruce is the standard. He was like that. He was a big, huge fan.
Right, and he was.
Oh yeah, he'd been dead.
It's in the '60s.
When you talk about the difference, here's the difference. I mean, in terms of things change. So Lenny Bruce is, he was convicted of obscenity in New York in '60s. So he's convicted in '66, and it has a 6 month trial. 6 month trial, and they convict him of obscenity, and they have the police officer doing his material on the stand, right? The police officer just whatever he remembered from his notes. So Lenny Bruce at the defense table going nuts, going, you know what? Let me perform it. You know what I mean? This guy's
I need the stage time.
He's not funny, but the guy's not funny. The cops reading notes of what he thought, the jokes, and he's just screwing it up. So 6 years later, now of course Lenny's conviction was overturned in '68 after he died. It was overturned by New York Court of Appeals. It said there was redeeming social value in his work. He exposed the hypocrisy of religion and race and talked about divorce and relationships with men and women and all that. So George Carlin, his album Class Clown comes out in '72. He performs in the summer at Milwaukee Summerfest. It's an outdoor music concert. And he performs that routine, 7 Dirty Words. He performs it live outside, and somebody complains and they arrest him for obscenity.
Carlin.
Okay, now here's the difference. So they go to the trial, and Carlin's attorney makes a deal with the prosecutor to let them play the album cut in the courtroom. So they play the 7 Dirty Words in the courtroom. The whole courtroom's packed, of course. Everybody's laughing. The judge is laughing. Case dismissed. It's funny.
Yeah.
It can't be obscene if it's funny.
I remember with Billie Holiday, they took away her cabaret license. You needed a license to perform.
You had that. That's what. Yeah, there was that did that to Lord Buckley, before they got the Lenny. They cut off Lord Buckley that way, and you couldn't perform without it. It was almost a scam. But the cabaret license was huge in New York. If you didn't have it, you couldn't perform.
Right. I don't know.
And you could buy it back. It cost a lot of money, but they weren't interested in selling Lenny his license back or giving him his license back. They really wanted to shut him up.
Yeah. Now, my first reaction or exposure was the movie with Dustin. When I saw that movie, it was holy shit. The idea that comedy and social consciousness and protest, there was a convergence there. It wasn't just Bob Hope and Milton Berle, who I loved and worked with and was a mentor to me, but still the fact that there could be this social convergence between injustice and stand-up comedy, to me was oh my God, it was like nitro and glycerin when I saw that movie for me.
Right.
And then I started to read, there was a book, Lenny Speaks, I forget the name of it. I read that, and I didn't even hear them. I just read the routines, and I went, wow. And I didn't have any idea in my own life that, I could be a comedian, or I could even remotely approach that. I didn't even, how to even do it. I don't even know. But
No.
No,
you don't. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, my first exposure was I came to New York. I got an NYU film school. I'd gone to UC Berkeley, was a drama major. And I met this guy who was a fellow student. Maybe you know him. He's a writer too, Seth Greenland. He's written a couple novels, and we were in film school together. And he said he was like friends with Richard Belzer. And there was he was like this guy, and he was up at this place called Catch a Rising Star. And I went, really? What is that? I mean, I didn't know shit. I didn't know anything, like, oh, wow. Like, and there are people like.
What year was that, Bill? What year was that?
Okay, so I graduated high school in 74. I graduated Berkeley in 78. So 79, 80, I was at film school at NYU.
Well, I was in New York.
That's when I was in New York, yeah. And I stayed there till 84 to New York. Or, yeah, 70. I stayed in New York till 84. Yeah,
wow,
all those places I was kicking around. And my own recollection was, so I got to check this out. Like, young people are like doing this stuff, this comedy thing. And yeah, it was funny in class, but I don't know, I just couldn't make that leap, like self. And then I remember going to the Catch a Rising Star, and for some reason I remember seeing Steve Middleman on stage. And he's just like, he had the kind of triple chin, and he was 23 or whatever the fuck he was, he's like, he's already got that face, And then I thought, well, he's funny, but like, it's not like, I think maybe I could do that. And that got the wheels turning. It took still many years for me. I did a play with Milton Berle, and we had a close convergence, really a great experience for me. And then he said, you should maybe try this comedy thing. And then I decided to go start. Yeah, that was my experience. Did you start in New York? So you started in Washington?
I started in Washington, D.C. in 77, and I was doing it a lot. But it wasn't full time because I was still going to law school. And then I made the decision I'm just going to New York to go for it. In early 79, like February or March, I moved up. And that was it. That was it. And then never looked back.
And you were just kicking around, like waiting outside on the street to get that little audition time?
Well, I know. Here's what happened. So this comedy club at Garvin's opened up in Washington, D.C. in January 79. And then I was like, Andy Evans and I were like the two house MCs. We just alternated weekends, and we'd do other gigs on the other weekends. And I met all these comics. I met, all the comics that were coming down from New York, Kelly Rogers and Belzer. But I was really became friendly with Glenn Hirsch and Rick Overton and Mark Schiff and Rich Hall, these comics, Seinfeld. And so a month or two into this, one of them was like, you got to go to New York, man. I mean, I've been hearing that for a while from everybody.
Right.
You got to go to New York. And I was like, what am I going to do here? And I made a decision. I'm just going to go for it. And that was it. So when I got up there, I didn't have to go do, the amateur night and get a line. I was not given a number. I was just going to put on the show on Sunday night, the audition night.
Right.
You know what I mean? I didn't have to go wait in line to get a number, maybe not get a number. They said, look, Chris Albrecht was the guy running it.
Right.
Him and Howard Klein was the assistant manager. And so I went up there and they put me on a spot. I did well. They said, okay, you can come hang out now. And that was like every night, just hang out at the bar and hope somebody doesn't show up. That's how you got spots, right? Otherwise, the spots I got were like 2 a.m. or 3 a.m. And I was waiting for somebody, on the weekends. I'd sit there like a vulture in that bar, drinking Diet Coke, smoking cigarettes, and waiting. Finally, some guy doesn't show up. Richie Gold. I never forget this, like how important it was to me. Nobody wanted to follow Gilbert Gottfried. He had this spot. Right after, it'd be like 3 comics, then a musical act, then Gilbert, and then the last paying spot was like the 5th comic on the show on weekends, 2 shows a night, right? That spot, Richie Gold had it one night. He didn't show. And I saw he was not in the bar, because I knew who the lineup was. And I saw those guys kept looking, Howard Klein and Chris Albrecht kept looking in the bar. They don't see Richie Gold. They're looking outside. I see him on the phone. I mean, I see it. I see him on the phone. I know what they're doing. They're calling catch. They're calling a comic strip. Where's Richie? Send somebody over. We need an act. Somebody get over here quick, right? And Gilbert's wrapping it up. And then they finally gave up. They saw me and, they come down and they're like, can you go on after Gilbert? Can you hold the crowd? Can you do okay? It's like, yeah, let me go. And I did. And then they were like, you did great. Now you're a paid regular. And I was like, paid regular, man.
Wow.
I can get paid weekend spots.
I mean, to me, I'm emotional listening to it because it feels like it's something right out of the movie Rudy to me. Like, Coach, let me in. Coach, let me in. It's all
you're just waiting for your spot, man.
Yeah,
and then you hold them. You don't die. You do good.
Uh-huh.
And then, you're okay. You're all right. You did okay. Gilbert was tough to follow. You could see, I mean, I knew that one night somebody was not going to show up because they were like, okay, I've done 3 spots. Why should I go beat myself against the wall
Right.
following Gilbert for my 4th
Was
spot
it
of the
because
night?
he was just such a killer, or was it
He
Screech
was a
Owl?
killer. He was killer. He was different. He'd do that Tony, that it was a stand-up comic named Tony from Brooklyn.
Mm-hmm.
And he would deconstruct stand-up comedy. Why'd the moron throw the clock out the window? Because he's a fucking moron. Listen up, I'm telling you this stuff, right?
Right.
It was like Dice Clay sort of character comic, and he was a guy in a restaurant says, "Hey waiter, there's a fly in my soup." The waiter goes, "Hey, what the fuck? I'm going to put a fly in your soup. I'm going to lose my job over some stupid fucking prank like that. What do I gain from this?" I mean, that was like, and if he closed with that, and then you go on stage, anything you said sounded hack. Anything you said, he had just deconstructed comedy for 5-10 minutes, or he'd do Quadra Dick, which was a takeoff of Jaws, where he'd hold a bar stool up to his waist and have the 4 stool legs sticking out, and he'd do like a Jaws parody, right? Where he'd do all these different characters. James Mason as the sheriff, and he just this different Jackie Gleason as Captain, Quint, right? Oh, I'll find your shark. Oh, I'll find it all right.
Oh my God! It's just it's amazing.
Yeah.
I think back on that.
You got to try to follow that. Good luck.
I think back as you describe those times, and I think back in my own memory. I mean, like the whole scene was on like rocket fuel. Like there was like some super high octane friggin' fuel going into those people.
Yeah, everybody was on just wanted to be as funny as we could. I don't think anybody had an idea. Maybe somebody had an idea of a career path. Maybe Seinfeld, because he was that smart and that focused. But most of us was like, just want to be as funny as we can and see where it goes. What happens? You had straight jobs. You had daytime jobs to go then hang out at the club all night. And when this road exploded, I mean, in 1980, it just exploded. All these clubs started opening. It unleashed all these comics who were pent up, not just in New York and L.A., but all the little cities that had comedy scenes like Boston and Houston, Texas.
Right. Boston especially, Houston,
San Francisco. All these club scenes, Cleveland, went to Cleveland, and Chicago had a scene out there, and then Philadelphia had a scene, and all these comics just blasted out into the country, where these clubs that were open.
Yeah, I remember for me, and I was, I was farther down on the bench. But the feeling that I felt is if like I didn't get on stage, it was like an addiction. Like I needed it. It was so fucking miserable. Life without a spot. Like it's like I was thinking today, like what are some of the silver linings of the COVID-19? Well, one of them is I don't have to sweat that I'm not getting spots anywhere for now. It doesn't bother me. There are no spots.
I felt bad. I didn't take a night off. Never. No nights off. Right? No nights off. And I felt kind of weird about it. And then I read a Rolling Stone interview with Richard Pryor. And this was at the height of his thing. It was like, I don't know, whatever, 78, 79, somewhere in there, wherever. And he told the reporter, I got to go to Hawaii for vacation. I got to go away. I'm going away for a couple of weeks. So when I come back, you can interview. And the guy goes, okay. So like 2 days later, he gets a call from Richard Pryor. All right, I'm back, man. Let's do the interview. Let's go. And the guy goes, I thought you were going on vacation in Hawaii. Yeah, I went on the beach 2 days ago. What am I doing here? I might not be funny when I get back. I gotta get back, get on stage. I gotta keep the funny going. Because you're worried about losing that funny, that whole momentum of if you don't do it every night, maybe you'll lose it.
It's like a boxer. It's a boxer.
Yeah, it's timing, everything. It's not like, playing a guitar, which you could sit at home and play and kind of have an idea, and you know what you're doing when you come out to the club. If you're not in front of that live audience, if you're not making them laugh, you're not being a comedian. You can't practice it at home.
No,
maybe guys would do impressions, Ken. I don't know.
You wrote some really cool books about this. As a matter of fact, I recall you actually soliciting people for stories some years back. And I actually offered you one, but it really wasn't. It was my story with Milton Berle, which was not really a club warrior story. I was sort of my experience with him, this cross-generational experience. But you had got a lot of contributors for that book. You did.
The book was called I Killed, and it was a great book and a lot of great stories in it. I had a Milton Berle story in it. There was just a lot of great stories from, everything you could think of. There, Chris Rock had a great story in it. All sorts of stories from all sorts of comedians.
Yes.
Seinfeld, whoever Mark Schiff and I put it together, and it's still for sale. I mean, we still get checks because
great.
people are still buying it.
How is Mark? I haven't seen him in a long time.
He's great. I haven't talked to him, hung out with him much, but he's doing great. And married to the same woman, 3 kids are all grown, doing well. Yeah. He looks terrific. Looks very healthy.
Oh, good. Yeah, he was what I called one of the best, and I say this in quotes, when I was a kid comedians. Like he could bring that family to life. His father, those stories.
Oh, he's great. Yeah, he had great material. And I am not your maid. I am not your maid. Right.
Yeah.
Yes, you are. They'll give me a sandwich. I mean, he had a lot of very funny bits. He's a very funny guy.
Yeah, I had a week with him in Indianapolis. It was like going to school. Like it was really instructive. Yeah.
But he was one of those guys. Another one of those guys. I mean, it wasn't a night you didn't see them there doing comedy every night. Guys are doing it every night.
Right. People. My thing is, you might be born funny, but nobody's born with an act.
Yeah, that's good. That's good.
Nobody's born with the act. You got to find it, figure it out, write it.
Yeah.
Like that. Now you've also been like we talked about this before I turned on the record, but you're like a historian for stand-up comedy as well.
I just got into it. I started. Phyllis Diller became a friend, and she was always a bit of a historian of stand-up comedy. We talked about a lot of different things, and she would encourage me to write a book on the history of stand-up comedy. I outlined 8 chapters and started writing it. And I said, this is coming out too dry. And so my wife was like, look, just go on stage and talk. See if you can find a thread, something that I couldn't really find it other than, okay, this guy happened and that guy happened. So I started really looking at it and started looking from the angle of like what stand-up comedy said about America at any particular moment, because that's what stand-up comedy is best at, is reflecting immediately the zeitgeist of the country.
Right.
Right. That there's no more. It's a real time art form more than any other art form.
Like Hamlet, he says he calls the players the abstract and brief chroniclers of the time. And I thought, yeah, they're the actors, but that's the best description I've ever heard of a comedian. We're the abstract and brief chroniclers. And
okay, I like that.
Yes, and it goes right back to Shakespeare. I've often been wondered what sort of the stand-up version of what that was like in the 19th century, maybe Abe. I have a feeling Abe Lincoln was very funny on the stump, and
well, he was the funniest president. The guy who was the first stand-up comic, I thought it was Mark Twain, because I know Mark Twain did the very funny lectures.
Right, that's what I thought.
And was an after-dinner speaker who was just there to get laughs. But he wrote an essay when I was reading everything I could about him, about the funniest guy he ever saw was Artemus Ward. Artemus Ward started doing stand-up comedy in 1861. At the very beginning of the Civil War, he started doing stand-up comedy. He'd become famous for writing these very funny letters to the editors. He worked for the Cleveland Plain Dealer, and he'd become a big name. His real name was Charles Farrar Brown, but since these letters were written by a traveling showman, a fictional traveling showman named Artemus Ward, he just created this character. He used that fame to draw crowds. And then he did exactly what we know today to be stand-up comedy. In fact, somebody said, what are you going to do? Because he was doing a parody of a lecture, really, where people would go on and talk about, the lectures always had a moral lesson or an educational lesson. Here's a new continent of Australia, and somebody would lecture and talk about that, or that slavery is bad, and they talk about that. And he says, I'm just going to go on stage and make them laugh as hard as they can for as long as they can. And that's stand-up comedy. And he became friends with Lincoln. Lincoln was you're right about that. I mean, Robert Dole wrote a book rating the presidents according to their sense of humor. And he rated Lincoln by far the funniest and the one with the best sense of humor. And he loved telling jokes. He was quick, very quick-witted. He was having a debate when he was running for Illinois U.S. Senator.
Douglas,
right?
With the Douglas debates, right?
That's right.
Yeah.
Right. So he's having a debate against Stephen Douglas. And at one point, Stephen Douglas says, and my opponent, Abraham Lincoln, is two-faced. And he sat down, and Lincoln stood up and said, ladies and gentlemen, if I were two-faced, would I wear this one in public?
Well, it's like, you can't write that. That's like brilliant.
Right.
Yeah.
I mean, it's brilliant. And of course, people remember it. I mean, he was funny. So he became a fan of Artemus Ward. Artemus Ward would sneak into the White House and telling jokes and stories. And Lincoln, if you know anything about it, he hardly slept during the Civil War. I mean, like 3 or 4 hours a night he was up. So Artemus Ward would come in, and Artemus Ward was a showman, like a show people. They didn't call it show business, but he was looked down upon. Mary Todd Lincoln knew he was a drinker and didn't want him in the White House, so he'd sneak him in, and he'd spend like an hour or so with Lincoln. Lincoln would feel refreshed. He says, "I'm refreshed to go back to the business at hand," and he'd go back to work.
Wow.
And he'd tell him jokes and he wrote specific jokes for him, and he took stories. He'd come in and tell him stories what he was doing, and he had jokes when he first started. The war first started, and he was doing his stand up. He'd had jokes about the war. He had jokes like, a pessimist and an optimist meet on the street, and the pessimist says, this darn war is going to last another 5 years. And the optimist says, why not save 50 and thoroughly enjoy yourself? 1861, good joke.
Yeah.
But as the war went on, he found, and this happens all the time, he couldn't do jokes about the war. He realized his job was to distract the audience from the war.
Mm-hmm.
So he dropped all references to the war in his act. I mean, he was learning on the fly. I mean, he was a star immediately. When you talk about the beginning of show business, he was at the beginning of show business. He was the beginning of celebrity. He became a huge star. His girlfriend was named Ada Menken, who was the first sex symbol in America. She was called the Body. She was like one of the first stars. One of his buddies was Edwin Booth, who was his brother eventually killed Lincoln, of course.
Right, yeah.
All right, James Wilkes Booth. And John Wilkes Booth, excuse me, and he was Edwin Booth became one of the leaders of the acting movement of the 19th century in America. He was friends with all these guys. This was like the beginning of show business in America.
In America, of course, show business has always been there. I mean, in Hamlet, I'm just referring back to Hamlet. Hamlet is complaining to the players, the group of actors that show up at Elsinore, about certain members of these troops that go off on their own and depart from the scripted material so that they can get laughs at the expense of the story of the play that the playwright, he's disgusted with that in the theater. It is completely a total abomination. Of course, Hamlet is like a mouthpiece for Shakespeare, really, at that moment. Right. And it must have been hilarious at the time when people heard that, because they knew of these kind of characters. So this is a theme across humanity, I think going way back. But
when you talk about somebody doing what we know to be stand-up, which is going on stage with the sole purpose of making them laugh, making them. That's all you're doing. You're not in it. You're but one person, not a group, not two.
The solo.
One person.
Yeah.
Right. Solo. So when Artemus Ward starts doing this, there are clowns, circus clowns.
Right.
Right. There's circus clowns doing it. There's guys like Dan Rice, and other people they would do during their acts, they would do this call and response stuff with other people.
Like court jestery kind of stuff in a way.
Yeah. Yes. The court jester there was either the white face of the clowns or the dark face, the black face of the minstrel players, right? So the minstrel people, but they're all in teams. They're on stage. They're teams, really. And so he comes on, he's doing it by himself. And it was radical. And people were coming out. Some people think they were coming out to see a lecture, and they'd come out of there. They'd walk out angry, going, "Yeah, I laughed a lot, but I didn't learn anything."
Interesting.
And people weren't used to. You have to understand, comedy was only a small part of any kind of thing going on. So it was looked on. If you laughed too much, you must have been laughing at somebody, mocking somebody, and that was rude. So laughter in public was not as free as we know it today. There's a story. It was credited to Mark Twain, but it actually happened to Artemus Ward, as I read more about it. It never happened to Twain. It happened to Ward. So he's performing. He's doing his best act, and he's bombing. What we know bombing. He's just not getting much laughs at all, and it's nothing's easy. So he finishes it, and he's standing outside listening to people talk as they come out, because you just want to hear what happened, man. Maybe he did something wrong. And one guy says to another old guy, says, that fellow sure was funny. The other guy says, sure was. All I could do not to laugh at him. People weren't used to laughing a lot in public. It was just not looked down on. It was looked down on as rude. That's what it was.
I wonder if there was this Puritan streak in America too that, was
absolutely. That was all part of it. All part of it.
Yeah.
The theater thing was looked down on. That's why when P.T. Barnum opened up his theater, he didn't call it a theater. He called it a moral lecture room. That's what he called it, a moral lecture room. Theater was the frivolous thing, and people weren't, you don't do that.
It's interesting, all these cross currents, like this comedy cross current, the temperance cross current, the puritanical cross current, all these, the pressure cooker that's this United States. We're still living in it, but it's interesting. I never heard about Artemus Ward. I always thought, well, I would have loved to have heard Mark Twain, in a lecture hall in Virginia City, just cracking up people,
Twain admitted when he went on stage right at the time in 1867, Artemus Ward was dying of tuberculosis in London, and Twain was going to, and he said, I was going on stage in San Francisco doing exactly what I'd seen Artemus Ward do. Artemus Ward was a deadpan comedian, which was totally new. He did that radically different because the clowns were very muggy, and so were the minstrel guys.
Mm-hmm.
They were very muggy and very, like yelling, and he was very deadpan serious.
And monologist.
And Twain was doing exactly that. He took Artemus Ward. See, your comedy reflects the time, right? In a weird way. So back then, you had to be working all the time. People worked hard to get by, just to live, to eat. If you didn't work, you didn't eat. You didn't have a place to live.
Right.
And so he did a slacker character, which was very funny to them. It gave them relief. They could laugh at that.
Mm-hmm.
Artemus Ward says, I can go for months and months without doing any labor whatsoever. And at the end of that time, be refreshed to go on for another couple of months of doing nothing.
Which is the classic comedian's job, actually,
Right. So, but I'm just saying that was a funny joke to people because they were, because it's a relief. And then Twain comes in and he says, why put off tomorrow what you can put off just as easy till the day after?
Which is interesting because the lives of the rich and idle has always been a fertile field for comedy and movies like The Philadelphia Story. I mean, it's all over the place. Down and Out in Beverly Hills, where the jaws of survival aren't right at their heels, those people could be funny, in a way that those working stiffs really can't, I think, So it's interesting how these themes are there. Now, we vault into the 20th century with comedy, and now we have the rise of media, first radio and then television and nightclubs and prohibition and all this stuff. And I imagine that's a new and different kind of chapter in what we call stand-up comedy.
Well, absolutely. I mean, first of all, vaudeville was very clean. I mean, I don't know if you talked to Milton Berle about that. He was a young guy in vaudeville. He was billed as the wayward youth when he was young, right?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, he was a teenager doing stand-up in vaudeville.
Right. He was one of the originators of the wise guy nightclub comedian, in my view.
Frank Fay was sort of the guy who started the wise guy character. Mm-hmm. Every time you come out of a war, comedy always gets a little bit more cynical, a little bit rougher, a little edgier when you come out of a war, naturally.
Right. Yes.
So coming out of World War I, Frank Fay was sort of like the leading guy. Milton Berle, Bob Hope, those guys watched Fay a lot. They picked up from him that you could get a little rougher with the audience, a little rougher with your comedy. Fay was real good at crowd work. I don't know if anybody knows any of his jokes per se, but they know the banter stuff that he did. And that's what he was known for. But Milton Berle was, definitely, he grew up even before he saw Fay as a stand-up. He got fired for working too blue. I mean, you couldn't say gosh or darn in a vaudeville theater.
Right.
You couldn't. There was things you could not say at all, and he get fired. Here's one of the jokes that Milton Berle got fired for. His girl says to him, "Are you staring at my knees?" He says, "Oh no, I'm way above that." Milton Berle says another joke. He says, I said to this girl, I like to take experienced girls home. She says, I'm not experienced. He said, you're not home yet.
Bingo. Yeah, there was another joke Bill did. Like, he said, I have sex almost, he goes, how often do you have sex? Almost every day of the week, almost Monday, almost Tuesday, almost Wednesday, almost Thursday. But that was his post 90-year-old days.
Right, that's when he's talking about, but I'm talking about this is 17, 18-year-old Milton Berle.
Right, but it's the same form in a way.
Right, it's the same form. Look, comics, you just generally, you're tied to your generation in joke form. That happens all the time. That's why, old comics sound old to younger people, because their joke form is it doesn't change. His joke form was set in vaudeville. It didn't change from that.
Right. He had a book. I have it, or I used to have it. It was like his dictionary, all the jokes, or he's like, he was an archivist of material. And,
oh my God, I think I got 3 of them here.
Yeah, frickin' frack. He was telling me, he was trying to teach me to do frickin' frack stuff. I go, well, I don't know. You got to learn that frickin' frack routine, because I used to sit with him in the Friars Club, and I go, well, who the fuck is frickin' frack, And then I used to sit there. He would, because after I did this play with him in New York, he said, Billy, come over. It's Milton on the Wire. And I'd go to the Friars Club, and it'd be Dick Shawn, the whole generation of those guys. And I was this young guy. And it was great experience in my life, But there was one thing I noticed at that time. There was a lot of generational jealousy about those young guys at the Improv, or at the clubs. They could say fuck and this and that, and we, there was. And I thought, I just think they're jealous because they're a little older, and
everybody starts to lose their relevance, and they start getting angry at the people coming up behind them. But it's natural. It happened. We did it to them. We ran them off stage. We got run off stage.
I'm feeling it now. Now I went to the Improv a couple of weeks ago, because I said this was before the COVID thing. I was like, I'm going to try again with some of these venues that I just don't like being in. I'm just going to go and hang out and see what happens. Well, I did. I didn't know one person on stage. And the material, I just thought it was like, run-on sentences. And I didn't want to be bitter because, I'm older and I know better, because generational jealousy can be a trap, for myself now that I'm older. But the hard part was I just didn't know anybody. And it was like, God, I'm just invisible.
That's the hard part. That's the hard part. You feel invisible in a place where you used to be relevant. The comedic language changes. I think in comedy, generations are 10 years. Like in normal life, they consider a generation to be 20 years, but I think it moves faster in stand-up comedy. The society moves faster. So the way comedians reflect it changes faster. And, so if you're going in there, you're watching comics 3-4 generations behind you. Yes. Everything's changed. The language changes. I mean, the comedic language changes. We were big on sarcasm, and they're big on irony. Just for instance, it's just it's a different language.
And they've built audiences through social media. And I go, how do you fucking do that? Like I'm trying, but I don't know.
That's important.
Yeah.
Every generation has a struggle to get to the microphone and to attract their fans, and it just changes. That's all. It just changes. Technology changes it.
Right.
The podcast today is really the comedy album of the 50s.
Yeah.
It's just a different way of attracting and marketing an audience that end runs the networks, gets around the powers that be.
I don't have to call in for a spot. I can just do this every week. I have a show. It's like so liberating. Last night I played jazz for 35 minutes on Facebook Live and was interacting with people. I go, they had to close down all the venues in the world for me to finally get a gig. I thought, this is hilarious. How did that happen? There's the irony. Now here's a question I have for you about the history. And I'm looking at one. It's about 3 inches from my face, and it's a microphone. And that must have really changed.
Changed everything.
Yes.
Early 20s, the microphone comes in. Before that, comics pretty much had to shout the routines. That's why most comics had funny songs. They did a lot of funny songs, a lot of funny dancing, rubber leg dancing they called it, and they were loud with the routines. Even though these vaudeville houses, these vaudeville theaters had a tremendous acoustics, you had to be loud. Most of the comics were loud. Then you didn't have impressionists before the microphone comes in, because you couldn't do nuanced impressions. In fact, nobody at home in the audience would know if you do an impression of, because the films were silent and there wasn't radio. So until movies came out with sound and radio comes out, you don't have impressionists. So the microphone changed everything. It made the microphone came around the same time as electric lighting And once you had the lights on the comic, right, a spotlight on the comic's got a microphone, so they're louder. It became heckler proof. Then it was no longer a fair fight with the hecklers. Before that, the heckler might be louder than the comic.
Right. And also for me, like to me, the microphone allows you to be intimate in front of
That's what I'm saying.
many.
You can't do impressions if you got to shout it.
Right. That microphone is
Right.
really a tool that allows you to be intimate in a
Right.
big room. I read this article, I don't know where I read it, but that Hitler understood the power of the microphone in a way that other politicians didn't.
That's right.
And actually the technology.
Radio. They were radio. He was early in the radio.
Right.
And he understood the intimacy of radio.
Yes. And that also that the technology of microphones, the sensitivity was more advanced in Germany, and Hitler got the benefit of it, which was really interesting to me. Like, wow, you know. So you've really traversed the history of stand-up comedy, you know, across the generations. And like, where do you think your decade? And I often look at comedians like athletes. You know, they have like, if you get to the Hall of Fame with 10 good years, you know, that's a good career in athletics, you know, professionally. When I look back at the decade of the 80s, like what's your like kind of takeaway from it? Like you look at it, it was compared to
it was a comedy explosion. That's what it's been called. Mm-hmm. And I don't think you say anything but that. It was a comedy explosion. Now, if you go before, there was the amount of comics that were in the country before that. Just the amount of comics.
A handful.
It's really unbelievable. A guy, I can't think of his name right off. Dr. Janis, he was doing a book about stand-up comics and comedians. So this is like in the late 70s. He finds 265 comedians in the entire country. Now, these are comedians who are professional.
In the 70s. In the
late 70s. I think it's like 78, 79. They pay their their clothing, their food. They pay their rent, their house, whatever. About 265. That's just from the top. This is from the guys who are making like, $10,000 a year to the guys who are making a couple million. That's 265 in the entire country. So within a short period of time in the 80s, there are thousands of comedians, and there are tons of them are making their living doing it. I mean, I don't know how many there are now. There's probably 265 comedians just in Toledo, Ohio right now. I mean, they're all not making their living. Now, again, that's the thing. Maybe they're not making their living doing comedy. There's just so many more. There are so many more amateurs and hobbyists now than before. You couldn't be a hobbyist. Nobody could let you on stage.
Right.
You couldn't get stage time. And now they're open mics, and there's so many more venues, and there's people who never intend to quit their day job.
It's a form of therapy now. People go to this stand-up class. It'll good. You can work out your issues, you know?
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, sure. I know. That's I mean, I'm thinking about that decade in the 80s. It was a decade of like massive overconsumption. It was cocaine fueled. And I just see this sort of energy into this. And of course, all those comedy clubs were spit out in malls all the way across the country.
It was that 70s build. It was that 70s build to get to it.
Right.
I mean, there was a lot of power behind that build, and it really was a baby boom generation. It was the baby boom generation.
Right.
That we were kind of raised. If you look at career jobs, stand-up comedy is almost perfect for the baby boomers. Who, there's a certain segment of baby boomers who want to be, independent, and we have a moral attitude. Our generation has a very moral attitude. We had one when we were young. We have it when we were older. Mm-hmm. That fits into stand-up comedy. You're very opinionated. What your opinion is matters more than anybody else's.
And we're carrying the 1960s inside of us, like all that rebellion. It's in you. You feel
we're very independent. Very independent. So it really fit the baby boomers, and we were raised on Mad Magazine, then National Lampoon, then Saturday Night Live. Saturday Night Live, I think, triggered a lot of people because we saw young people being really funny in a way that looked exciting to us.
Yes. Oh, I remember the first generation of that cast, and okay, I got to be home Saturday. And I was spoiled after that. I never really was a fan. I was like, maybe I was pissed because I wasn't on the show, or I was passed over, or I didn't get picked. I don't want to watch that guy. I did this. I remember I did a set at Igby's, and it was like Rosie O'Donnell and Dana Carvey and me. Okay, and Cher was in the audience, and who was that guy who was the big guy at NBC? He was the head of it. He died young. He was the one who
Tartikoff.
Brandon
Brandon Tartikoff. He died young, and he was in the audience, and I had like the best set I fucking ever had. I just tore it down. I was so happy. Rosie O'Donnell got a TV series. Dana Carvey, they flew him to New York to be on Saturday Night Live, and I went home.
Yeah.
I just like, oh my God.
Yeah, you know, all you can ask for is to be weighed and measured. That's all you can do.
I mean, it was a great night for me, but you know, it was like the vagaries of the fame game and dealing with those disappointments were, for me, very challenging, I have to say. I mean, I didn't know, like, one of my biggest triumph is learning to be happy in spite of my disappointments. That is the biggest accomplishment.
Sure.
You know, and I know you took a hiatus from stand-up for a long time, as I did.
Yeah.
And why, or what happened?
Well, I was a bunch of reasons, but I got frustrated, like you were talking about. I was just missing that brass ring that you spoke about so many times, and then I was writing for TV, and so I was performing less and less, and I found myself not performing at all. And I had kids, and I was raising the kids, and I thought that's what I should be doing, put my focus on them. And I got away from it, and I got depressed. Without that stand-up comedy, I got depressed, and I came to realize how important it was for my mental health to be creative, and to hear that laughter, which it's music. It's my music. It's like a musician not playing music anymore. You're going to get depressed if you don't hear that music.
I hear you. I had a few. I just a memory of you because I remember bumping into you, and you're like a softball dad in the Valley. I remember you were like your daughters or somebody were playing softball. It was like Franklin Fields, where I grew up playing baseball. That's like where I grew up, you know. And I remember seeing you, and it was like, you know how you connect dots if you like write a novel. I go, yeah, and I saw him in this year, and he was a happy softball dad in the Valley. But he was this guy was a high octane comedy killer 10 years ago, like before, you know, at the Improv, and he was chewing the fucking scenery. That's folks, that's Ritch Shydner, man. He was chewing the scenery, the sweat, the whole energy, that energy that like Springsteen put into those performances. You were channeling through stand-up comedy, and there you were just like this happy softball dad, or seemingly happy softball dad in the Valley, but there's a missing piece there, you know. So
there was a missing piece, all right. You didn't notice the extra 40 pounds I was carrying?
I'll tell you a story apropos that, because I got very frustrated and I couldn't handle, honestly, the people had so much control over my wanting to perform and then looking at me like I was nobody. It was like, I don't know, like I directed a movie about it. I don't know if you ever saw it. It's called The Solar Opposite, about a comedian whose love life is a joke. It's with Chris Maloney. I mean, it's a good movie. It's out.
Oh.
Yeah, you should see it sometime. It's all available on downloads, and I think you'll really appreciate it. You will dig it.
Cool.
But I remember Richard Jenny, who I thought was like this really good comedian. He seemed like everything was like you could ever want as a career in comedy. You know, okay, I mean, he's not a movie star, but the stage is there for him. He's just racking up specials, and he's widely admired. He's really doing it. He kills himself.
Yeah.
And I thought, he kills himself. And I go, I hadn't done comedy for a while. I was in a relationship, and I was like, I just trying this out, you know. And I went to the memorial service at the Laugh Factory, and I saw a lot.
I was there.
Yeah, you were there.
I spoke.
And Jay Leno was there, and I just sat there, and I just came to this understanding about myself, is that the price of ignoring who you are is higher than the price of being who you are. So you might as well be who you are. And
good point.
And I just thought, I'm going to try. I don't know. I don't have any status as a comedian. I don't have like the badges from the Letterman and the Tonight Show and all that stuff, but it's who I am. I'm just going to go out there and do it, you know? And and I've managed to find a way to do like a couple weeks a year, or, you know, maybe at the Laugh Factories in Vegas and Reno. And I don't do a lot of it, but I still love it. It still makes me happy. Even when I do like those Christmas shows for Jamie at the Laugh Factory, when they give the dinner and I go up and do, I feel good. That's my Christmas present, you know? And you know, and it's like, but I also felt the flip side of that is that if I'm not doing it, it's like managing an addiction for me. That's all. I'm trying to do it and still be happy and have some balance in my life. I don't know, you know.
Yeah.
You know,
it's that balance is a difficult thing.
it is. Now, what is life like in North Carolina? I mean, like I can't imagine.
Asheville, North Carolina.
Yes.
Well, we love it here. The view out of my office is spectacular. We're on the side of a mountain.
Blue Ridge Mountains, right?
Yeah, Blue Ridge Mountains. My mom is from North Carolina, the Blue Ridge Mountains. She's from a little higher up in the elevation than I'm living right now. But we love it. We love Asheville. We love the whole community. I like still doing creative things. Just don't have to live in LA anymore. I'm not going to write on a series. I'm not looking to write on a series. I'm not looking to be an actor. So why was I in LA anymore? I mean, it just didn't make sense.
Right.
You know, and why am I doing this struggle just to get by in LA when I can live more comfortably? And I just loved everything about this area.
Now, I did a little research prior to this, and you're not the only writer of renown from Asheville, North Carolina. Thomas Wolfe, I believe.
Thomas Wolfe is much more renowned.
Look, Homeward Angel, I think, is about Asheville, North Carolina. And F. Scott Fitzgerald spent time there, I believe. And Carl Sandburg. Apropos of Lincoln, he was one of the great biographers of Lincoln.
Yes, he was.
So I believe he's from Chicago, but I think he lived there too. So I guess it has an artist colony or an artist vibe there as well.
It has an artist vibe. These mountains definitely has an artist vibe to it. They had a lot of Thomas Wolfe things around there. Thomas Museum. There's he's obviously a favorite son, but it's just there's a good vibe to it. I like it.
And you're happy.
I am. That's the thing. I'm very happy. Very happy being here. I'm just working on this show about the history of stand-up comedy and doing some other things I want to write. And I still do straight stand-up once in a while as the call is made and the need arises. I do it.
It's fun.
I'm getting a lot out of this show I'm doing on the history of stand-up comedy. Is very funny, so I get a chance to tell stories and jokes and it's a lot of fun.
That's great.
So I'm getting a lot out of that.
It's great. I mean, like starting with that Artemis Ward and
So I go all the way up to Steve Martin, and that's where I end. And then I have a Q&A if anybody wants to talk about any more of the contemporaries. But I felt like once you get to Steve Martin, that was sort of the end of that era and the beginning right before the comedy explosion that you and I lived through.
Right. He was like working at the Horn in Santa Monica before.
He was the first rock star stand-up comic.
Yes. Yeah. I'll never forget. I had a week once with Dice Clay, and we were in El Paso, and not El Paso, San Antonio, and it was like a movie theater, and I was in the airport with him, and he was wearing these loose-fitting clothes, like, I don't know, and he's talking about, he hadn't blown up yet, because why would he be with me, on a club date, but he was bubbling, I guess, and he was talking about himself in the third person, like he was going to be the biggest thing of all time. And I just remember sitting to myself, looking at this guy in these loose-fitting kind of shorts and sandals, almost like pajamas, talking about himself in the third person. I'm thinking, this guy is out of his fucking mind. He's fucking whacked. Like I'm going to be the biggest thing. The Dice is going to be this. I mean, within 3 years, he was like Madison Square Garden or whatever.
Right,
like,
I know.
Like I thought he's an Elvis impersonator. He's a Jewish guy was doing Elvis, and he has this highly ritualized. My point is, what the fuck do I know? Meaning,
none of us
nothing.
know. I mean, you could go back there, and nobody picked certain people. Nobody thought that Arsenio Hall would be the stand-up comic that would knock off Johnny Carson. Yet he did.
He did.
I'm right. I mean, you can look back and think, well, this guy, Jerry Seinfeld bombed out on Benson and the acting role he played on there,
right?
And declared, I'm never going to do sitcoms again.
Well, I'll tell you,
Seinfeld. And then he ends up co-creating the greatest sitcom of our generation.
I'll tell you this story. I get a call from my agent. It goes, hey, Jerry Seinfeld's doing a series. They want you to come in and read. I go, well, which part? I go, well, you send me the thing. I go, okay. So it's like Kramer, and there's the other one, the two best friends. I forget Kramer and the other guy.
George Costanza.
George, yeah. So I don't know. They gave me, and so I walk in. It's Larry David sitting behind a desk, and Seinfeld reading. Okay. I was a comedian. I'd been around, but I mean, I guess I had more cred maybe as an actor. I don't know. I was still totally obscure when I still am. But I remember sitting there and reading the scene with Jerry Seinfeld. And I would have been thrilled to have been, called back or have gotten any part. My life would have been completely different. But I remember sitting there reading in the moment thinking, fucking guy cannot act. He's just total stiff. Like, this thing is going nowhere, It's like,
Again, you're wrong.
this doesn't have a shit fucking chance in China. Like, I walk out of there. Of course, I did my best, but I look at the size. Like, what's this shit? It's about fucking nothing. I throw it away, walk out, never have a second thought. Of course, the rest is history. Like, under the category of what the fuck do I know? Like,
there it is.
Less than nothing. And I'm sure you've got a million of those stories yourself.
Sure.
That's like, I have no regrets about it. It's funny. I mean, he knew what he was doing.
Look, Jerry was one of the funniest guys of our generation, obviously. One of the best comedy stand-up writers.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, just a great writer of material, and he performs his material perfectly
for himself.
I mean, he's very economical. He reminds me of, David Bowie on stage was very economical in his movements, and Seinfeld didn't waste any energy up there. I mean, he got to the comedy, whatever action he was taking, just was perfect. I'm a big fan, obviously.
Right.
I think his comedy's brilliant. He's funny. He's a hard worker. He inspired me, I know. Because I remember talking to him early on when I first moved to New York, and Jerry's like, "Look, this is our job, is to write in the daytime. I'm not driving a truck around delivering things. I got to write jokes in the day, so I go on stage at night and try to make them work. I got to have lots of material. His idea was that he would have lots of material in the suitcase. So when they called him to do the Tonight Show, he'd be 5 shots ahead.
He was.
So he was thoughtful. He was the first guy I ever talked to about those sort of things of the mechanics of stand-up and a plan. And, I don't think there's any mistake about people's success.
And the discipline of his writing. I mean, there was very little wasted verbiage and ums and likes and uhs.
The timing was there, man.
It was poetry in the sense that it was what is it? Brevity is the soul of wit. Wit is the soul of something. The soul of brevity and wit. They're all in there somewhere. But my point is, he had that brevity.
No, economical. And then there's somebody else. I mean, who's a different kind of performer is Larry Miller. Just as funny. They were great friends.
Right.
But a totally different type of performer. And that's what I loved about when I got to New York. There were so many different types of stand-ups, and you have guys more improvisational like Rick Overton or Glenn Hirsch was a lot of energy on stage, man.
Yes, I remember his eyes. Yeah, I hear from him on Facebook. He just sent me something. I gotta check. Yeah.
I mean, there were just a lot of different types of people.
Right, because you can only process it through your own soul or your own self.
No, you just. When you start, I was a mass of my influences.
Right.
Richard Pryor and George Carlin and Robert Klein and I sounded like a Jewish black hippie. I mean, it was like, what?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, you just have to strip away all the influences and then become what was funny about you originally.
Right, but we all sit, just like jazz musicians sit on the shoulders of their predecessors. We're all like, it is a pyramid, I think, of creativity. I mean, there's that line between theft and influence. It's never totally been completely defined, but we do.
And there will be.
Yes. Wow. Shai, this has been a blast, man.
It's been a fun time. Thank you so much, Bill. I really appreciate it.
Oh, I just always admired you on many levels as a cool guy, funny, the fury and energy with which you committed yourself to stand up, the fucking joy. I could see the biofeedback, how it would go through your soul and out. I have one sort of new little mantra when I get on stage. I say, I just want you to know that my need to perform outweighs anybody's desire to see me. So thank you.
That's good. That's good.
You know, I feel
That's
that. And I'm sorry that I was so close to you. I made it to Columbia, South Carolina on election night for the Biden event, which is not too far from where you are, I guess.
Not at all. Not at all.
And, you know, it would have been great to see you, but I'm sure you get back to LA and maybe you can find time for
I will. Bill,
yours
I hope
truly.
to see you. I'm probably going to have to change my date of May 14th through the 16th at the Yard Theater. I was going to do this stand-up.
Yeah.
But we'll probably be changing that. But I'll let you know.
Yeah.
I definitely want to see you.
Stand-up comedy right now is about the most dangerous form of entertainment alive because to projectile vomit COVID-19 viruses across a room with thousands or hundreds of people laughing is about the most dangerous situation you could conceivably imagine.
We found out how necessary we are to a functioning society. The first thing they did was just shut down the stand-up. Get that idiot off the stage and clear this room.
Yes.
That's the first thing they did.
Yeah, we don't need laughter
are not
here.
necessary to a functioning society.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, people are showing up.
And comics go, well, who's going to make the people laugh? Let me tell you something. I got a book on death camp jokes.
Yeah.
Not one professional comedian is mentioned in that book.
Oh, really? That's
They made each other laugh in a death camp. I think they're going to make each other laugh during this virus. Just fine.
God, what a time we're in. I know we'll get through it.
Yeah, of course we will.
You know, I just trying to make sure I'm there when it happens.
Right.
You know,
Right.
I've locked it down totally. I've said the one thing about podcasting, it's the one form of show business that has still not been canceled. So, you know, I'm grateful for it. So, brother, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Ritch,
Thank you, Bill.
be safe, and I will talk to you soon, man. Thank you so much. Take care.
Thank you.
Thanks for tuning in, and I'll catch you next time on A Rebel Without Applause.